Over the centuries, the Russian and Austro-Hungarian empires have all wielded jurisdiction over Ukraine, which asserted its modern independence in 1917, with the formation of the Ukrainian People's Republic. Russia soon wrested back control of Ukraine, making it part of the newly established Soviet Union, and retaining power in the region until World War II. From the Soviet point of view that Putin still embraces, it's simple, he says. The Holocaust aside, Ukrainian nationalists were bad guys because they fought the Soviet state. Putin and other critics often draw on Ukraine's wartime collaboration with Nazis to basically characterize the modern country as a Nazi nation. The Russian president deemed the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine.
Okay, now I'm going to put you in a geographical context. First, we must note that Ukraine is located in Eastern Europe and shares a border with Russia. Here we can compare when the USSR existed and when it was dissolved. Both countries were part of the URSS, but eventually Ukraine became an independent country in 1991. Ukraine borders several other countries that are members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and you should know that this is a very important defensive military alliance formed after World War II. President Putin sees Ukraine as a historical part of Russia. In fact, in 2014, Russia invaded the Crimean Peninsula and southern Ukraine. Since 2014, Russian-backed separatists and the Ukrainian armed forces have been waging a war in the eastern regions of Donetsk and Lugansk, in which more than 14,000 people have been killed. All this background has increased the tension in both countries, and this was triggered when President Putin recognized the two regions' control, as mentioned, as independent states and ordered the sending of Russian troops, breaking a peace agreement reached.
The war in Ukraine comes at a bad time for the world because inflation was already rising. Less than a month before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Independent Central Bank forecast that the 180 billion economy would grow 3.4% this year after the difficulties of the pandemic. However, what means a catastrophic impact for our economy for the region overall, according to Alexander Royanitsky, who is an economic advisor to President Zelensky. He adds, we already see massive destruction of roads and bridges and infrastructure, so that is something that we will have to be rebuilt over the years when the war is over. It's hard to put a number on that right now, but we can already see that we are given our percentages and GDP growth just because of that happening already. Economists said measures imposed on richer banks and companies by the US, EU, UK, and their allies were having severe impact on financial markets in Moscow and would inflict more damage on Russia with their economy over time. Russia's economy was estimated to have grown by 4.5% last year after having shrunk by almost 3% in 2020. The worst year of the pandemic for the global economy. Analysts say that the Ukrainian war made a limited impact on the global economy because trade links between Russia and the rest of the world were limited, with the country accounting for 1.5% of the global GDP, for 2.9% and 0.9% goods exports from the Eurozone and Britain respectively. However, the invasion has triggered a surge in global energy prices.
Now, let's talk about the culture of Ukraine and how it relates to the conflict. We already talked about the history of this country. We know that the relationship between Ukraine and Russia is complicated since years ago. Ukraine is composed by different ethnic groups. Almost 75% of the population is made up by Ukrainians. Russians cover a little bit more than the 22% of the population. The rest is made up by a big diversity. There are Polish, Belarusians, Slovakians, Gypsies, Romanians, and Hungarians. This means that a big percentage of people has a Russian culture. The war is causing massive cultural losses, despite the fact that Ukraine has been kept alert to protect its historical and architectural heritage of the conflict zone. The work of the artists Maria Primachenko, has already been destroyed after the bombing in the Infante Museum of Local and Historical History in the northwest of Kiev.
Now let's talk about the implications of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in the society. The fuel and natural gas situation is one of the hardest things to deal with at this very moment, especially for the German and European people, because for those, more than 40% of their supplies came from Russia's conducts, and because of the war and the sanctions, those conducts are closed right now, being not able to deliver the gas and the fuel to the gas stations, creating the fuel crisis. For the people, the prices are going up and the economy is going down, making a real crisis in all the continents. Another important social event that is happening at this very moment are the riots and protests against the war and the invasion from Russia to Ukraine, especially for those who are Russians that are outside of Russia. The discrimination and rejection has increased in the last days for those who support the war. Of course, the political movements did not wait. The United States of America is the main promoter of the sanctions and the one who proposes to replace the supply of Russian fuels for those who need it. So right now, the dice are in the air, and now we have to see how the things develop, because right now, the outlook is somewhat unknown.